My name is Mitch Resnick. I'm a professor at the MIT Media Lab, where I lead a research group called the Lifelong Kindergarten Group, because we're inspired by the way kids learn in kindergarten. So in our group, we develop new technologies and activities that, in the spirit of the wooden blocks and finger paint of kindergarten, engage children of all ages in creative learning experiences. You know, when a lot of people hear play, they think of laughter and having fun. And of course, those are great things, but I don't think that's at the essence of play. When I think of play, I don't think of an activity. I think more of an attitude, sort of a playfulness, is when you have a certain stance towards the world where you're always willing to take risks and try new things and experiment and test the boundaries. For me, that's what playfulness is about. And I think we want to help everyone grow up with that type of playful attitude where they're engaging with the world in a way that they're constantly trying new things and experimenting. And when I think of playful learning, I think of play connected with three other words that begin with the letter P: projects, passion, and peers. I sometimes call the four of them the 4 P's of creative learning: projects, passion, peers, and play. Because I think the best playful creative learning experiences come about when we're working on projects based on our passions in collaboration with peers in a playful spirit. Because when we work on projects, it's very different than just answering a problem that someone gave you and giving an answer. When you work on a project, you have to come up with an idea, start with an idea, create something based on that idea, experiment with it, show it to others, work with others, keep refining your project over time. And I think that's where the most creative learning happens. So we want people to work on projects, but people are only going to learn a lot if they're working on projects they care about, that are based on their passions. One thing we've seen over and over is that when people are working on things they're really interested in, they're willing to work longer and harder and persist in the face of challenges, and they make deeper connections to the ideas that they encounter. So we want to make sure that people work on projects connected to their passions, but that we don't want them to just work on their own. We know that most learning doesn't happen when you're just sitting there by yourself in contemplation. Sometimes people get the wrong idea when they think of that great Rodin sculpture, The Thinker, just sitting by himself contemplating. And of course we do that sometimes, but I think the most important learning experiences come when we're learning with and from others, when we're collaborating, sharing, building on the ideas of others. So we're always thinking about how can we support people working with their peers. And then of course they should be doing all of these things in a playful spirit where they're experimenting, trying new things, taking risks. So for me, playful learning is about bringing those 4 P's together, providing opportunities for people to be actively engaged in projects, based on their passions, in collaboration with peers, in a playful spirit. That's the way that people will have the best playful learning experiences and develop as creative thinkers. When I think of a play lab, I don't think so much about the products that come out of the play lab, but the process that's going on inside the play lab. We sometimes talk about what we call the creative learning spiral, that we think when people are engaged in creative experiences, it starts with the imagination. People come up with an idea, but it's not enough just to come up with an idea. You then have to create something based on that idea. So you imagine and then you create, and then you start experimenting and playing with the thing that you're creating. That you test it out, see what happens, and then you share it with friends. You get other people to come by and you say, what do you think of this? Try it out. And they give you feedback and suggestions. And from your experimenting and you're sharing it with others and getting feedback, you start reflecting and how might I make this differently? How can I make it better? What should I change about it? And as you reflect, you get new ideas, you start imagining again, so you go to the next iteration of the spiral. So I imagine a play lab being full of people engaging in that creative learning spiral where they're constantly imagining, creating, experimenting, sharing, reflecting, and imagining new things. So I think we need to create spaces that support all of that. How can we support the imagination, support the creating process, create sharing? We thought about this when my colleague Natalie Rusk started after-school center called the Computer Clubhouse. This is 25 years ago, and we worked on it together. It's now spread. There are 100 of these clubhouses. As we worked on these clubhouses, we wanted them to be types of play labs where kids would learn through playful, creative experiences. So as we thought about how to set up those spaces, we really tried to support all parts of that creative learning spiral. Even though it was called a computer clubhouse, in the middle, we put a table without any computers. It was a green table, sort of like a village green, where people could gather together, share ideas, sketch things out, start tinkering with things, have lunch together and share ideas with one another. But around the green table, there were these clusters of other tables. It was not at all like a classroom, with rows of tables with kids sitting at it, but more these clusters where kids could go around. It was a little bit more like an invention studio or an artist studio where people were experimenting and creating in all different parts of the room and always clustered together. There was never a table by itself or in a row. Little clusters where people could gather together, try things out together. If there's a computer there, several people could gather around it and work on it together. And even we thought about the chairs all had wheels because we wanted it to be easy for kids to slide around and say, hey, what's going on over there? Maybe I should try that out. And they would gather together. So collaborative teams would form for a little while and then people would move somewhere else and try something else out. And we also made sure that in the walls of this room, we didn't want bare walls. We wanted it full of ideas that would spark the imagination to trigger that imagine part of the creative spiral. So on the walls were lots of examples of what other people had done. There might be images of different types of collages or illustrations they'd done, or shelves with different types of physical objects that people had created, and sculptures or 3D printed objects. So you could look around the room and see what was possible, and that would help spark ideas. So as people would come into the clubhouse, they would see examples of what had been created in the past. They would see people around working on things. That would give them ideas about what they might work on. They might look around, see what's going on, gather together, talk to people at the green table. So there's always a humming to the room where people were constantly moving around, coalescing into teams, breaking into other groups, checking it out, both kids but also adult mentors. And we told the adults they weren't just there to teach lessons to the kids, but they also weren't there to stand back and only answer when they were called upon. We wanted them to be in the mix. They were always asking authentic questions like, oh, that's interesting. I never saw that before. How did you do that? Or did you ever imagine that was going on? So even though we made these clubhouses for kids, I think this is the right approach for learners of all ages. So in starting a play lab, I think it should have the same type of elements that we had at those computer clubhouses, to support all parts of that creative learning spiral. So I think it's thinking about a play lab to keep in mind, how can we best support imagining, creating, playing, experimenting, sharing, reflecting, support all of those activities, and then you'll have a truly creative play lab.